Or Bev.
She's off to her son's wedding.
Let's go ahead and call the Capital Investments Committee meeting to order. First item, actually, second item on the agenda is approval of minutes of February the 9th, 2012. If everyone's had a chance to read those, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Proper motion is second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Margaret, do you want to cover briefly what, an item that you wanted to?
Yes, this is not on the agenda, but I have spoken with several of you about it. And I just want us to get Franklin Road back on the table. I know we can't do anything about it now, but it's way down here on the list. And I just think that we don't need to forget about it. The money is coming in from, James trickling in from the apartments that are being built. It's my understanding that 98% of the final engineering plans have been drawn, and that was $355,700 that's already been spent on that design. And I just would like for us to at least get it back on the table. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you want to handle that, but, and I certainly I'm not saying put it ahead of any of these others, but we just need to look at it.
Let me comment real quick on just where that is
Sure.
and how that fits in. As you pointed out, it was one of the projects that was considered in the prioritization that we did a while ago, but have been working from in terms of looking at the funding plan. I think it was around 20 or 21 in that prioritization listing.
21, I think.
21. And it's about a $10 million project. In terms of the sidewalk funding, that's somewhere around $400,000 that we've collected on the sidewalk. I think a little over 400,000. So that provides a portion of funding, but you've got a pretty big portion still to come to find where to fund it. One of the things that's on Tuesday's agenda is revisiting the CIP, some 3 specific projects that are out there that we're looking for final direction on, but that is an opportunity
Is that one of them?
It is not, because we looked at the higher priority grouping, but that's an opportunity to raise that issue as a question for the full board, if you want to look at where we go with that. But really from my perspective, I'd say it's about the priorities that you give us with the funding capacity that we have available, and that's right where we are in terms of meshing priorities with funding capability. So the board wants to revisit specific priorities. That's always your prerogative, and that's something you can ask and bring up to the group as a whole. I will add one relative component to this that we're looking at, or related component that we're looking at, is an option to provide some sidewalk connection between downtown and the factory in Harlansdale. And staff's been working on that as an option, that doesn't get into the full $10 million project, but might provide that sidewalk connection. There are a lot of issues to look at with that, but that's something staff's been working on that we were looking at as an option to look at our operating budget as a potential capital funding. Look at the cost of that project, look at the funding that's been provided, what's the gap? Could we provide that as a ongoing capital project within our budget as an option?
When we talked about that before, when we talked about the transportation plan, it seems to me that that's when we talked about it the last time, when we talked about the...
Franklin Road or the...
Yeah, Franklin Road. Did we talk about adding a lane for a turn lane?
There is an inconsistency between the design that was done in the streetscape mode and the direction that we got in the major thoroughfare plan. I'll let David talk to that a little bit.
The direction we received during the major thoroughfare plan update was that we would not widen Franklin Road from downtown to McHatcher. It would be no widening, and the streetscape plans were developed based on a 3-lane section for Franklin Road, which is a widening. It's an additional lane.
Out to how far does that project go? Do you remember?
That project right now only goes out to Harpeth Industrial Court. So it's, or the entrance into Harlansdale. That's as far as that project goes.
If we decided somewhere down the road to add that third lane as a turn lane, is there enough roadway there now to do that?
Probably pretty much there is enough asphalt already in a lot of the area. What we end up doing is we curb and gutter, put in the drainage and all that allows us to use that existing asphalt for a third lane or whatever. Now, it may be some other needs are widening if this school is going to, the lower campus of BGA, if it stays there, that's a major traffic situation we have that we need to address, which may actually, kind of like at Franklin High School, may need us to put a fourth lane or a right turn lane or whatever. That's something we haven't really gotten into as far as the final look in the streetscape plans. But yes, there's enough right-of-way for what's proposed. And for the most part, there's probably enough asphalt already down. It's just not adequate asphalt.
I just think we need to look at that third lane. I think we would be remiss if we did not look at that in the long run. And as far as BGA goes, I think they are planning to build.
Well, they're building
That
at the,
campus out there.
at the main campus, but if they do move there, then it's just like when they took over the Harpeth School, somebody else is liable to come in with another school. So that's something that would need to be considered as we're finalizing everything.
Well, whatever. I just would like for us to get back to it, put it back on there, and certainly consider what you're talking about. Adding I don't know what the full plan was for the streetscape. I never saw it. I really don't know. But I know we need sidewalks, and I think the turn lane is going to be really needed, at least to Harpeth Industrial Court.
As Mr. Stuckey said, we're looking at some alternatives, kind of like what we're be talking about Tuesday night as far as some phasing or whatever. That's kind of looking at a lesser project to get some improvement to allow to do what we're talking about. So
Yeah, when
we're
dollars
just
are-
not there yet.
When dollars are limited, you look at
Oh, I
what
understand.
components you can do to serve some of the needs, and that's what we try to
So we
do.
may not be able to do the full-fledged streetscape thing, but if we could just get it so that it's usable, and somebody's not going to get killed on it.
And what we did overall with streetscape projects is we took all of those projects from a design perspective and finished whatever logical piece we were at, whether that was preliminary design or, in this case, near final design. We took it to that logical conclusion or step and then are looking for funding to take it to the final step or the next steps, just because we didn't want to spend a whole lot of more additional design money on projects that weren't super high on your priority list, quite frankly. So we were trying to balance those funds with other projects and other priorities that you had.
I just don't want us to start thinking about 3rd Avenue South and 4th Avenue South before we do Franklin Road, because I think that's just imperative.
And I will remind everybody, Hillsborough is a streetscape project as well.
Yes.
So, just,
Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Item 3, consideration of ordinance 2012-10, an ordinance to reduce the speed limit on McAtcher Parkway from State Route 96 to west of State Route 6, US 31, to be 45 miles per hour in both directions. Parker, you're up.
This is an ordinance that we've been asked to do from TDOT under the construction. They wanted us to get a reduction in the speed limit. Now, what we're proposing is a reduction in the speed limit that will last after construction, and the reason is it's going to a curb and gutter section, which dictates that we should not have, and it's been designed at a 45. You do not design those over a 45 mile an hour speed limit. So that's what is being proposed. I will tell you that, and I don't know if Paul's had a chance to do it, but in looking at the ordinance as written, it's a little vague of the limits. We are changing that. We are revising the ordinance to recognize the limits of it. In other words, we're saying from State Route 96, well, we're going back to, and this is, Paul was unaware that we have kind of used this convention in the past. we're going to use our local designation, Murfreesboro Road, and then in parentheses, put state and federal numbers where everybody has a better idea of what the limits are or where we're talking about. Because I had phone calls about why are we looking at reducing from from Hillsborough, Murfreesboro Road to Columbia Avenue, and that's not what this is. This is from Murfreesboro Road to Franklin Road, so that
And
is
that's
under
because of the
construction
curb
now.
and gutter.
It's because of the curb and gutter.
And it's basically that section under construction right now.
Yeah, and we just need to get it done where we can have it there during construction for safety issues on that too. But we'll have the correct ordinance
We'll update the ordinance. It's
for
on
you Tuesday
It's
night.
on
actually.
Tuesday.
It's first reading Tuesday night. It's a two-reading ordinance, of
Do
course.
you need a motion for that?
You can make a motion to recommend. Are you even going to take it to the workshop?
Had not planned to.
Not unless this committee would
Unless
like
you
us
want
to.
to.
That's an open question. It's one of those tricky scheduling ones where we have this meeting before and we've already released that agenda, because some weeks, some months you have that conflict. So we do the best we can with what we have, but if you'd like to, we can defer it, or we can put it on the work session next time, whatever you all would like,
I don't know why we need to talk.
depending on how
Well, it needs to
comfortable
be
you
on
are
a
with
work
that.
session. I don't think anybody would object too much to that. So, you want to make a motion, Margaret? Recommend to the full board?
I move that we recommend the 45-mile an hour speed limit to the full board.
Second? Unless Dana may want to say, I want to say just one thing. We need to be very aware of speed limits and speeding tickets and everything that we do. Because every time we lower one of those speed limits, and you got a 2-lane road out there now that's carrying 55, right? We're gonna build a 4-lane road and we're gonna drop it down to 45. I think I can just about tell you what's gonna happen. You're not gonna drive 45 because you got 55 on both sides. And that means that there's another opportunity for speeding tickets to be issued. And, if it's designed for 45, if it's an engineering design for 45, that's fine. And I'll support the 45. I just hope it doesn't become a major issue at some point in time. And I can understand the construction traffic out there also, so it probably needs to be 45. Well, you can't do more than 45 now out there, the way the barrels and stuff are, so. But, proper motion, second, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I hear out of both ears, I only heard out of one.
I may not vote that way Tuesday.
Well, and I made my say.
And we did put that on the new business because this hadn't come before the committee, so it will
You
be
mean
on
it
there
set
for a
off the
separate vote.
controversy meter?
Exactly.
Mike?
Have I seen a 45-mile-an-hour sign out there already? Is that for the
In the
construction?
construction, yeah.
Well, there are some areas that have been
They're already
designated
45.
45 anyway. When you get close to the signalized intersections, it has been an area in some cases where it was already reduced to 45, so.
Well, we're trying to move traffic.
Yes, we are, but it's the design is what's, you know me, I want it as fast as I can, but when you have curb and gutter, what we end up doing is, if you have above that 45, then you're introducing a liability situation. Should somebody hit the curb and at that higher speed, that's the liability that comes
Okay.
back to us that we're trying to avoid, so.
Item 4, consideration of final change order with W.L. Haley and Company Inc. for the Downs Boulevard 12-inch reclaimed water line and west reclaimed water line, ARRA Project City of Franklin contract number 2009-0099, Division A, for a decrease in the contract amount
approval.
of $372.06. Proper motion, second.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Item 5, consideration of final change order for W.L. Haley for a decrease in the contract amount of $69,641.54, contract number 2009-0099.
Move approval.
Second.
We do want
I thought
to,
we had already done this.
no ma'am, This particular issue here is that we will be getting a reimbursement back because the project was not completed in a timeframe that was contracted, and we would not give them the extension of time that they asked for because it was not justified. So we will be getting back reimbursement of $81,000 out of the contract. What this does is sets the contract, and then out of the retainage that's been held back, we will get $81,000 of that back because the project was not completed on time. So I want to make sure you understand that.
Item 6, consideration of change order number 2 final with BBC and Company for the Harpeth River Greenway Project. City of Franklin contract 2011-0043, RTP grant number GG09 2745500 for a decrease in the amount of the contract of $64,144.60.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Item 7, consideration of amendment number 2 to the professional services agreement for State Route 252 Wilson Pike and McEwen Drive intersection improvements, City of Franklin contract number 2010-0152.
What this is we're willing to get included in the contract, which is not a part of the contract right now, reimbursable items for our consultant, and mainly right now it's because we had to do a permit fee for CSX Railroad. It's easier and it's better if we let it go through our consultant, he pay it, and then we do a direct reimbursement to him when at exact cost. There's no markup in the cost, and there'll be some other permits possibly that come along. So what we're doing is adding the ability to have the reimbursement. I will tell you that this has already been done as far as the CSX. We went through Mr. Stuckey. It is a $12,000 fee that we had to pay, but this is a very critical issue. We did not want to wait, so we have gone on and done the permit through with our consultant doing it. So in other words, I'm telling you, we're asking if you to approve something after the fact, but we felt with the time frame that we're working on and everything, and as you're well aware, on this particular project, we're pushing as hard as we can. We have already done it in this case, but there may be other cases and probably other permits that will have to go, we'll need to go this way too. So that's the reason we're asking for this amendment.
I move that we recommend approval to make this official. Do we have to take it to the board?
Yes, ma'am.
Second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Item 8, anyone have any questions on any of the CIP project status, street project reports?
I have one thing that we wanted to discuss, and that is on the, the McEwen Drive, Wilson Pike intersection. I wrote a letter to you concerning where we had been offered to purchase, the property owner for a particular piece of property wanted us to purchase all the property instead of just buying the right-of-way. Mr. Stuckey has sent that letter out to you, I guess, a couple of weeks or so ago. We did not want to proceed with offering or anything until we had some feedback from you or from the board as this is something you want to do. The cost, as per the appraisal we received on that, is $312,950. That would be what we would offer if it's not a vote necessarily, but just a consensus of getting some feedback of us going through the negotiations for purchasing the entire piece of property. If we just purchase the right-of-way we need for this particular project, it's only $19,224 for just the right-of-way. Now, there'll probably be some damages that would have to be added to that if we go that route. Plus, when we go to the McEwen Drive extension east of Wilson Pike to the city limit, when we do that project, we'll have to buy this piece of property. It's something the roadway as designed, as set up for that extension goes through the house. Right now, the house is empty. It is a lease house. Nobody's in it because it's needing some repairs before they can rent it. We feel it's the cheapest and best thing for us to do is go on and buy this property. and not have to pay for relocations in the future if we only buy the right-of-way and they fix it up and rent it and that sort of stuff. There's other issues concerning the intersection that's not included in the memo that we're really going to need some of this property for access easements for adjoining properties to bring them out when we build this intersection, to bring out those driveways at the intersection versus bringing them out at Wilson Pike, right at stop bars and things like that, which is getting to be a dangerous situation if we do that. So there's several reasons we think we need to go ahead and purchase it, but we did not want to start that acquisition process until we had some feedback from you as the board. So
The biggest point on this is that you're eventually going to need the whole property when that extension goes through, which we've already committed to that
Eventually
project.
it's gonna go
The
through.
timing of that project is unknown because it's driven more by development, and that's the agreement we updated with the city of Brentwood a year or so ago. But you're going to need it eventually, and we've got an owner that's willing to make that transaction now. And it does simplify it because the property's not rented right now, and so there are some pieces that come together to make this potentially a good time to go ahead and get that secured so that you don't have to worry about it later in terms of other complexities and other additional costs and timing issues.
And looking at it also and talking to Russ, and I'm not sure Russ is here
He's not
right
here,
now.
he's in a
Okay.
training.
Russ has indicated the additional monies, we have this, what is that, facilities
The
tax?
facilities dollars that come from the county,
Yeah. He says there's enough funds in that for us to make up the difference of what this will add to the project itself at this time, so. And it is something that can be looked at as that's what that is for, so.
that's the funding source we used for that intersection improvements and the improvements on McEwen around Wilson. And so we could extend
Right.
that same funding into this piece of property to help both with that project and the ultimate extension.
If we own this property, what would happen to the house?
We'll tear it down. We're going to have a project going out pretty soon bidding, some demolition of houses, the ones we're going to end up buying for the flooding and things like that. And our intent is if we go and buy the property, we'll include this particular piece of property or the house and all the structures in that particular bid, and we'll have it torn down. We don't know what that'd be right now, but it will be a little bit
Think
additional.
anybody would be interested in it?
In moving it or whatever, that's always a possibility, and we bid our demolition projects to where whoever gets that a bid, if they want to, they can move it. So and if they do, then typically it creates a situation where that particular one would be less expensive. We're going to bid on per line item, each property demolition, but we're trying to do it to where we have one demolition contractor and multiple properties, so it ultimately comes out cheaper on us on how we do that.
Well, I move that we recommend to the board that we go in and buy the whole property.
If you just give us some direction that that's okay, then we'll
It'll
bring
come
it
back to you anyway.
for
So you
more
don't
formal
want it.
action.
We don't need them. We don't need
Well,
them.
you don't know, yeah, I think we're just directing the
If we
city
just get enough
administrator.
direction that
to
you're
proceed.
okay with us proceeding
Yeah,
with
I-
getting that put together and then bringing it back for you for formal direction, that probably
We'd
works.
have to bring it
for
back
them.
for
I
the
am.
final approval anyway.
Works for me.
All right.
Thank you, that helps.
Before we move on, I just want
Go.
to highlight the McEwen Drive Phase 3 project. As we come near the end of the project, we're tentatively looking at doing the paving towards the end of March, so hopefully we can get that road open early. That's largely dependent on weather, so just wanted to provide that update that the contractor is preparing to do that as soon as possible.
If weather cooperates, it could be about 2 weeks from now that paving gets going.
Yeah,
right?
March 19th is the week that they're tentatively scheduled to start paving.
So really wasn't any advantage to opening that early for them.
The way it's looking right now, that would have been very little benefit, so that the weather's helped us out on this one.
Okay, I have a question.
Go.
All right, letter F, Carlisle Lane voicemail, signalization. Where are we on this?
We're waiting to find out where we're going to be on the funding. That is one of the projects that will be discussed Tuesday night as far as when we're talking additional funding scenarios for the CIP
Is the
prioritization.
condemnation over?
It is, we just initiated the condemnation. It's been sent to our attorneys
It's by the time that, when they send it to court, it typically is over within about 60 days or so. Used to be quicker, but it's not that quick anymore, so.
Then we are waiting on the funding.
Fund the
Funding.
construction,
And
yeah.
as soon as the funding's there, it'll be done.
As soon as the fund is there, we will wrap up everything as far as the plans and get it out to bid and bid the project and start it. Yes, ma'am.
Right, thank you.
Any other street project questions? Anything on water and sewer? Stormwater projects, Jackson Lake dredging improvement projects.
Yeah, I'd like to provide an update on Jackson Lake. We may have some residents that would
Gentlemen, would y'all like to come up?
Come on up.
Yeah. That's
You
fine.
like good?
Wherever there's a microphone,
I have people.
okay. For the minutes, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and maybe an address also.
Okay. Bob Sconey with 126 Jackson Lake Drive in Jackson Lake.
Luann Jacobs at 401 Tree Shore Lane in Jackson Lake.
John Jensen, 608 Elk Springs Court.
Paul?
All right, well, I'll give a quick project overview, and then you guys can feel free to ask questions. Right now, where we stand with the construction of it is the contractor's experiencing delays with that. In the last 4 months, he's requested 112 additional days to the project, which we have verbally rejected over and over again, and we've recently drafted a letter that sent to him rejecting that totally. In the last 4 months, there's only been 99 days that they can work out there. So at this point, the project's getting pushed back due to their means and methods of dredging. One issue that they're claiming with the delay of the project is associated with trash in the lake. We've asked multiple times to get a price to remove this trash. As of now, we haven't been able to get a price that they would be in agreements on, and I've seen some emails floating around about as far as is the city telling them to put the trash back in the lake, and I want to make sure that it's very clear that we have directed the contractor that any trash that is found in the lake should be removed from it. We've offered to pay for a dumpster to put it on site, on the dredging site over by the church, to take care of this trash and handle that trash. And I believe that the contractor has talked to some of the residents out there, and that's probably the concern that we have here today. We've actually gone as far as putting an inspector out there full-time, all day, every day, to watch and monitor this trash situation. From what our inspector is saying, there is actually very little trash that is being found, and we believe that it's more of a means and methods issue as the way they're actually dredging this lake. They're basically claiming that they're getting clogs in their dredging operation. And what we're seeing is a lot of the clogs are associated with rocks, natural wildlife mussels, in the actual sediment is what's doing the majority of the clogging. To date, they have pulled out very, very little trash out of the lake, and at this point, we feel they're just trying to use this as an excuse to avoid having to pay liquidated damages to get additional time added on to the project. We're actually going as far as trying to get a price from an independent dive team that could possibly go out there and assess the trash situation for us, because over the last 2 months, we have gotten such little feedback from the contractor as to how much trash are they actually getting out there. Can you give us a price? Can you give us an estimate? And the only thing that they can continually come back and say is that we're willing to put a dive team out there for, around $200 per hour per day, and assess the trash that way, and we can't just write a blank check to them to do that. So we're working with our consultant, CDM, essentially now to see if we can get somebody to go back out there and evaluate the situation for us.
What kind of trash are you talking about?
There's lawn chairs that have been weighted and put in. There's just natural trash like tree or portions of trees, limbs and things that have over the years settled out to the bottom. Rocks, concrete blocks, just
For tires and tires.
there's plastics, there's tires, there's just generally what you consider, as we were discussing before the meeting, this lake is almost 100 years old, and there's going to be stuff like this in the lake. I mean, it's just So that's basically my understanding anyway, what's in there. So
Well, when you dredge, isn't that what you're supposed to take out?
you're taking out the sediment is the main purpose, but if you're dredging, you want to get everything out
Everything you can.
that you can. You want all that type of materials out of the lake. You don't want it in there, so.
We're trying to draw some kind of conclusion out of this, what they're claiming and what we're observing, and I think what Paul's identified as an opportunity to bring in at very little cost, working with the consultant, a third party to sort of assess this and say, how much of this is a trash issue and how much of this is a means and methods of project completion that the contractor needs to be responsible for. And so hopefully we can get off of that and get on with getting the project complete.
And one thing I want to clarify to everybody too is when we talk about means and methods, that is something that we do not dictate to a contractor. He is responsible for his means and methods of doing the job on any job we do. We don't dictate how that's to be done. That's part of his expertise he's supposed to bring to the project.
And we have made it very clear that any trash that comes out of that lake is to be stockpiled and removed from the site and not go back into the lake. I know that there was some emails saying that they were told to put it back in the lake, and that is absolutely not true.
That is exactly what we were told by the vice president of the company and also the superintendent on the job.
That is
Who
absolutely
did they
not
say
true.
told them to put it back in the lake?
Some of the city folks in the back there.
Yeah, that is absolutely not true. And we recently had a meeting and we went back and looked at the meeting minutes, and it was clearly stated that any trash that is pulled out of that lake is to be removed, stockpiled on site. We've offered to pay for a dumpster.
Yeah, I appreciate we appreciate
Yeah.
the clarification. I mean, we're only hearing one side of the story.
Yes.
But allow me to elaborate just a little bit. Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. I live directly across the street from the lake, so I see it every day. I also have a dog, so I walk the dog 3 or 4 times a day. As relates to the trash that's in the lake, they have removed about, it depends upon which one, 7 to 13 tires. They've logs this big that they had to cut up. And part of the problem is that those dredges have tillers that are dropped down to the bottom of the lake to stir up the sediment. And what's happening is those tillers, as they go, and they hit one of those concrete blocks, or they hit a log, or they hit some other obstruction, it tears the dredge up, and they're down then. The downtime is 2 to 3 days, sometimes even longer. In fact, they've had to remove one of the dredges twice to repair it. So, I think it's 6 and 1/2 to, the problem is a little bit on both sides. They've also had crew issues. In fact, they were down. I think they just brought a couple additional crew members in just the other day, and 2 more are due in. But I have observed a considerable amount of trash coming out of the lake. And bear in mind, year before last, when we had that terrible flood, a lot of stuff also went into the lake. And I think you're all aware that the amount of sediment went up, from 34,000 cubic yards to 50-some thousand cubic yards of sediment? Is that about right?
Well, we don't think that's attributable to just that flood, though. We think it was just the way that it was measured to begin with, because it wasn't as precise a method of measuring when we first had the measurement done. So there's obviously additional sediment, but I don't think that was the cause for all that additional sediment.
But you have heard that we're stating, the city's stating, no one is telling the contractor to dig up something and then put it back in the lake.
That's
It
what
comes
we
out, it
heard.
stays out.
Comes out, it stays out.
And when we saw that
You have to
email,
cut
we
it up, cut it
reiterated
up.
that to the contractor.
All righty.
In the contract that you're talking with is actually a sub-consultant. He's not even the prime consultant.
Right, but he's the dredging contractor.
Yes, he is the
that's
dredging
the
contractor.
one that's
Yep.
Yes, that is correct.
passing on that information.
Yeah.
And he's the vice president that was giving us that information. Well, that alleviates quite a bit of fear. Because it didn't make, it's
And I'm
penny-wise and
happy-
pound foolish not to remove.
Did any of
those.
you all ever observe them putting anything back in? I'm just curious if we ever saw that. Anybody ever saw anything like that?
The drivers have told me they've just moved it.
Okay.
In other words, what
They didn't remove it, but they left it there kind of thing?
Yeah, what happens is they dredge an area and they hit something, say this is the path, so then they take that and they move it over to where they just dredged. Now, there was a consultant out there just day before yesterday, I think, with a sonar, so checking the lake. And I would imagine that sonar would pick up any of those major obstructions that are still on the lake.
Well, I thank you for doing the project and your support, so I appreciate everything.
Oh,
you all
absolutely.
have done. We really appreciate it. The residents are very appreciative of it.
Well, we hope to get this issue resolved and get on with the project, get it completed.
Yeah.
I would say only 65 to 75% of the time, both those dredges are working.
Yeah, that's what we're saying is the means and methods. That's their
Yeah.
operation, the way they're set up.
And the other major issue that we have is the creek. A lot of sediment is being out of the bags, you know, when it flows back into the creek's filling up with sediment. So hopefully,
It should be going into a sediment bag, so that
It's
should not
not.
be a problem. We'll take a look at it.
yeah.
It's
In
not
fact,
all
your person
sediment.
on site has also taken pictures of that and has commented on it.
Okay, we'll look at that issue. Appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you. Keep us informed.
Any other questions or comments on Jackson Lake?
I would ask that you, the residents, if you could, contact our guy on site or Paul or somebody in the engineering office.
Get the straight
It-
scoop, huh?
If you have any complaints or any questions or anything, just go direct to us.
Is he in a public works truck? What truck is he in? Usually, how's he identified?
He's in I'm not sure, does he have a personal vehicle he goes?
a white City of Franklin vehicle with logo on it.
It's got the
Okay.
Yeah, I talk to
stormwater
him about
logo.
every day.
Stormwater.
He's a
Stormwater.
nice guy.
Who is it?
It's Donnie, is his name, he works,
Okay. We'll do it.
Donnie Burns in the street
We'll
department.
make
And
sure
if you
Paul
don't
got a
see him,
card or
Yeah, I'll
just
just get cards as soon as we're done
Call
here.
Paul and him at the
we'll
engineering.
get it to you and you can track us down if you have any other questions.
We don't want you out there hearing wrong things.
Well, we don't want to dredge it and then have to come back in a year or two and go through the same thing and suddenly find out that somebody only halfway did it. So, we want it done right, then we're paying for it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
for coming.
We, and we is all of us.
Yeah.
Neighbors and city.
Yes,
Yes.
Well, you are part of the
one and the same.
All of us together on that one.
Any other issues to come before this committee? I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Goodbye.
And all in favor indicate by saying aye. We got it.